last week and it was only an hour and a half because I went to the afternoon.
Right, so just go for as long as you need to get that 3 hours.
But if we stay for the whole, can I count that 30, extra 30 as we do ahead? Is that what you're-
Probably not during training.
Oh, not during the
Any other time, yeah, any other time, yes.
but I did hear that right.
Yeah, observation doesn't count toward continuing it, but the article does.
The article's not for our observation, the article's for our continuing.
Okay, so it does not count.
Sorry. Okay, all right, it's just about everybody is here, I think. Hello, hello. How is everyone? Are you glad it's Tuesday? Are you glad it's the last night of training this week? All right. So a couple of things. All right, a couple of things. First, fingerprints. So remember I promised we were going to email you a fingerprint coupon, yada yada. Well, we're not doing it till next week. So it's not your imagination. You didn't miss anything. We're going to send it out next week. That works better for Myra. We're getting, we have an audit we're getting ready for, so we're all kind of nutty. And it's due on Friday, and so, yeah. Which is not a big deal. I don't think auditors are out to get you, but you want everything to be just right. You don't want to get dinged. Volunteer references, I mentioned that yesterday. It's coming, it should say volunteer reference survey in the subject line. And so if you're, we're sending all 5 and we need 3 back. Okay?
Do we have a status, like, is there some sort of status update on?
Yeah, I can do that next week when we talk about fingerprints. We'll let you know what else we need.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Let me make myself a note.
What if we don't remember who we? Hey, I asked,
If you don't-
that's why I was like.
If you don't, if you want to know who your references were, just shoot me an email and I'll send them to you.
Is this different from the ones that were initially sent during our interview?
Nope, it's exactly the same. Yeah, most people, we interviewed over such a long period of time, some people can't remember who they put down. Okay, so fingerprints, volunteer references, court report. So yesterday was overwhelming, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's brain was hurting by the end of the day. So the video will be up. Cross your fingers tomorrow. It's a very slow computer that I have. So hopefully the video will be up. I'll email the handouts to everybody. And then don't stress about this mock court report. It's just practice. Nobody's getting a grade. All CASAs want A's. Everybody's an overachiever. They all want A++. It's just practice. I know Anthony wants an A.
How do we get through the video?
I'll send you a link.
Okay.
I'll send everybody the link so you can rewatch it if you'd like to.
Okay.
Okay? So the court report, we're going to do your best, start working on it, and then next week, email me any of your questions. I know it just happened yesterday, but are there any particular questions right now? I know Linda said, what did you mean about making up information? What I meant was, if you want to tell something in the story that makes sense to you, but you don't necessarily have a video or a role play to back it up, that's okay. If it makes sense to you and it's something you think a CASA ought to put in the CASA court report, go ahead. And this court report is going to be much more challenging than any other because you haven't actually talked to all the people.
So in the Word document that you're going to send us, will that be the template that we'll actually
Yes.
use?
Yes.
Okay, so it'll already have the headings.
Yes.
We'll just fill in.
Exactly. So
Okay.
today, open in my email is an email to everyone, emailing the Google document and the Word document.
Good.
I just haven't sent it.
Okay, that's fine, that's
Yeah.
fine.
All right.
We don't want to be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't either. No, it just kept going on the bottom of the list today, so I apologize. So don't sweat it about this court report. It's just practice. The first court report you write, your volunteer supervisor is going to work with you, stand by you, help you write it. It's really going to be, unless you're in Burleson County, you're going to have that adversary court report to work from. It's not going to have a ton of information, but it's a place to get started. Okay? All right, let's look at our questions. I don't know what, Dr. Cade? Sometimes she slips in. So we'll see. She may think it's 6 o'clock. I may have told her 6 o'clock. So we'll hang out and see if she gets here. All right. All right, so somebody had a concern about the judge. Who's already been to court? What'd you think about the judge, Linda?
It was, again, very difficult to hear him, but one of the things that impressed me, and did before, he was very firm about CASA's role, and how, in fact, I know I remember him saying this in my case a long time ago. He said it again yesterday, or last week, which was, CASA can be, telling the parents this now, as they're standing up there, CASA can be your best friend or your worst enemy. So it's very nice to have a judge who kind of sets the parameters and the tone right off the bat.
Right. It is, and he's very pro CASA in Brazos County. The judge in all the other counties is very, likes to hear from CASA. You get to testify, and I say testify, you guys saw, it's just a semicircle in front of the judge, no witness box, although everyone is sworn in. And in Burleson County, he does read the court reports, but he doesn't usually call on the CASA. Usually we have to speak up if there's something we want to add. And so that's really different. But we did hear from the judge specifically, I don't call on CASA because I've read their report. So that made me feel good. I thought he was ignoring the reports and not letting the volunteers talk. So, all right, so here was a concern, working with parents. So that kind of came up last night. Are we the parents' CASA or are we the kids' CASA?
Kids.
So I think Chantel made that pretty clear. You know, if we're going to talk with parents, we say we want to represent the best interests of your children, and whether or not you finish this service plan, what's going on with you, is going to help me decide help me understand what's in their best interest.
I like what Chris said. He says right off the bat, I'm here for your kids and I'll report to the judge.
Yeah.
That's a little bit scary.
Well, but it's honest,
It's
right?
honest,
And of course, Chris is such a military, he's former military, he's such a military guy, he would scare me if he came to my house.
Yeah.
All right, time commitment. How's everybody feeling about the 15 to 20 hours a month?
I
Which,
think it'll be more,
you think it will be more? I think it will be in the beginning, I think it'll be a lot closer to 20.
especially if we have to go to San Antonio or,
Yeah, and that's just, if it's San Antonio, that's just once every 3 months.
okay.
Yeah. Okay,
I didn't know about that.
San Antonio is more than 120 miles.
Yeah.
The state is big.
This state is big, yeah.
How many cases do y'all have pending now?
Right now, I got 6 last week, and, I'm sorry, 6 the week before and 3 last week. So we are scrambling. Now, we've kind of managed, but I have 3 without volunteers right now. So, oh, these are good. So somebody was worried about aggressive parents. In all the time we've been doing this, we have never had a safety issue. Doesn't mean parents don't get aggressive, but it's usually not personal. They're usually really irritated with CPS and the system. Okay? You're not going to be meeting parents in their homes until we are recommending reunification. And by golly, if you're afraid of dad, why the heck are we sending a kid back there? Right? So you should have a pretty good relationship with the parents if you're recommending reunification. Not being able to place a child. So tell me about that concern. We don't do placement, right? We recommend placement, but we don't make placement arrangements.
That seemed to come up in court last week in the morning session. That there weren't any family members to take the kids.
Right.
And the boys, or one of the boys was at an institution, and you know the kids were spread out.
Right. Well, I can tell you on a conference call we were on this morning, which is the permanency conference. So it was one of those, we don't have a volunteer on the case, so it was me and Kathy. And one of the main things we said was, hey, we've got dad's sister is appropriate, seems to be safe and appropriate. Can you do a home study? And so, but we were the only ones talking about that. So we just bring that to their attention. And then we'll just be the squeaky wheel. Hey, how's that going? What's the status? Have we, you know, that kind of thing. And disappointing a child. What do you think about that? How do you guys feel about that? You think it might happen?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Because the kids might want to go home to a situation of neglect or abuse, and it's not in their best interest to do so.
Right, and so we don't make promises. We let kids know where we stand. I understand. And when we look at those best interest factors, it talks about considering a child's preference, but that best interest has to trump preference, especially when they're really young. And so I think being honest and saying, I'm gonna go to court and I'm gonna talk to the judge and this is what I'm gonna tell him. You know, age appropriately, right? And when we have our Connecting with Kids session, we'll learn more about what questions and how to interact with kids of different age levels and different developmental levels. Okay, sound good? Anybody need anything? Dr. Cade is here. Come in, come in. I'm gonna.
Somebody had a question?
Oh, I'm sorry, did somebody else have a question?
The docket for tomorrow doesn't have any afternoon.
Oh, I forgot to talk, I'm sorry, Rochelle, you're not on yet.
Okay.
Okay, so the docket for tomorrow is only in the morning. You've got submission of orders, which will go really fast, an initial permanency hearing, permanency review, several of those, a progress hearing, which, and that's an interesting case, Ruiz. And then a permanency review after final order and a progress hearing. So it's a good mix of what you'll get to see. There's CASAs on all those cases. On the Ruiz case, there's 2 CASAs. And so definitely come, but it will only be till probably 11:30. So 9:30 to 11:30. If you want to go tomorrow and you want to walk over with staff, just be here by about 10 after 9. They walk over at 9:15. Sound good? Okay, and so if you go tomorrow and you get 2 hours in, yes, you have to get your final hour. Okay. Sorry. And there's no, I'll give, come on in, teacher, and I'll have the docket next week also. And I think that Taylor gave you the link to the docket, so you can look at it also. Yes, ma'am?
You said there's 2 causes in that case? Why?
Because they're 2 sisters, and originally they were 2 cases, and now one came into foster care, and then the other one did. So 2 causes, and it's complicated, and they're teenagers.
So do they have to agree on their like reports before they, or do they have 2 separate reports?
You know, that's a really good question. Let me find out. Yeah, that's a really good, I think it's just one report, but I will find out for sure. I'll try to answer you before the end of tonight. Okay, Rochelle, you're on. This is Dr. Rochelle Cade. She does this training for us pretty consistently, and we love to have her. So we're going to talk about domestic violence. So in the tape, the 911 tape that the judge is going to play for you, you're going to hear what domestic violence is really like. And when we talk about trauma tonight, you know, witnessing a trauma is a trauma. Okay, so your dad doesn't have to hit you. If he's hitting your mom and you're watching it, that's a trauma and it affects your brain. Okay, so Dr. Cade used to work with offenders as well as she's worked with victims. So she comes with a real unique perspective, and we're glad you're here. Would you like some water?
At some point I might.
Okay, I will get you some.
Thanks.
Let me-
It's a huge group.
We started with 35.
You guys, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for a little while, and I walked in and was like, wow, this is a good size group. I'm Rochelle Cade. I teach at Mary Hardin Baylor. I teach in our counseling program, and so essentially what I do is teach people how to, thank you so much, how to become counselors, and so clinical mental health counselors, marriage and family therapists. Before I did that in my life, true statement, I did spend time working with offenders. In my own master's program, I started working at a women's shelter, and people would say, oh, you work with the victims, how sweet, and I would say, but I don't. I worked on the offender side, and some of those folks are victims as well and experience victimization as well, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And so I started there, and when I would go places, people would say, well, how do you work with those people? And so it never occurred to me to think about like categories of people. I was just, these are my clients and this is who I work with, and other people work with children and other people work with families. And so I knew that was sort of a fit for me because I didn't question it, it didn't seem odd to me, and so I paid attention to that. Let's see, what else did I do? Other kinds of things. I went to school for a long time, which sounds a little bit impressive. It just means that I paid a lot in tuition for a really long time. Let's see, I moved out of state. I worked at a juvenile facility, and so they call them state schools or development centers, but they are a jail in form and function. There's turnkeys and locks, and kids are in cinder block rooms, and so I worked with juveniles there, and I did some crisis work when I was there, so I have seen a little bit of the juvenile side. I worked at adult probation here in Brazos County, not as a probation officer, as a counselor for probation. And so currently I don't work with clients directly, but all of my students work in a clinic in Belton, and it serves the community, and we have a contract either an MOA or an MOU, one of those things, with both adult and juvenile probation. And so my students see the clients, and then I supervise their services. And so I stay connected in that way. And it's sort of my heart and passion. So sometimes people think there's offender services and victim services, like we need to choose sides. But you guys very well know that when there's a household, there's not a side, right? It's all kind of in the same household. And so there's not sides. We're all on the same team. We all want kids to grow up in safe homes. We all want families to be healthy. We want kids to feel safe in their homes. And so whether victim services is helping to do that or offender services is helping to do that, we're all doing our part, right? All right, so I am an instructor, and I am used to being interrupted. There is no dumb question except for, will this be on the test? Because I don't know. But also because you will be tested in multiple ways. And so it's not always on the written exam. It usually comes in the form of your clients or someone who's sitting in front of you, right? And you're like, that's the chapter I didn't read, right? So anyhow, but please feel free to interrupt. I know a little bit, and I'm hoping to share some of that with you, and you guys know a lot, and if we put both of those things together, I imagine this will be a good experience. I have 2 books with me, and so I know some people like to say, well, what should I read if I want to learn more? So I brought kind of a smart one, and then kind of a more fun one for a read. But if you'll remind me to pass those around when I get to that point, because I am likely to forget, right? All right, so most of the time when we talk about domestic violence, and I saw the chart and I was like, man, I don't even know what that means. I don't even know if that's good or bad. I was like, man,
It's really, really good.
only 4 dots, but some of those are really good dots to choose from. All right, so if you look at those questions there, most of the time in reference to intimate partner violence, and so intimate partner violence means that you've had some sort of dating relationship, even if it's one date, even if it's a one-night stand or whatever it is. So there's some sort of intimacy associated with that boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, whatever, spouse, of course. And so people have general questions, you know, when we get close to this topic, and they say, all right, so if somebody is being hit or hurt in their household or their relationship, then why would she stay, right? And so I want to acknowledge that there's violence that occurs the other way. There's females who are violent towards males. There's same-sex violence. Most of what we see is male violence perpetrated to females, and most of the damage, like harm, happens from female to male. So females get hurt a lot more often, and their injuries tend to be a bit more severe. And I'll talk maybe a little bit more about differences of that. So people want to know, so why does she stay in this relationship? If she leaves, why does she go back to him? She knows he's a sorry SOB, or she knows what she's getting herself into, so why does she go back anyway? Does she just have low self-esteem? Is that why she's doing this? Does she just not feel good about herself or feel worthy of someone who won't do this? Another theory, and people ask this as well, was she abused as a child? Is that why? Is that why she goes back? Or is that how she got into that relationship? And if people get past those first 4 questions, the last one is usually the one that sticks and where people have a lot of emotion and passion around it. And so, okay, so I don't care if she has low self-esteem or what happened in her childhood, but why can't she leave to protect her own children? And so people want answers to these questions when we're talking about domestic violence. So I'm going to do my best to maybe give you some of that. But before I do that, you guys look like a very smart bunch. So there's a question on the bottom, and it is for you. So what do those questions at the top have in common? Okay, they're blaming her, she. I heard some she's somewhere out there. Anybody else? Other thoughts? So you guys are right. One of the things that these questions have in common is it asks about her, right? Now think about that for just a second. So if he is being violent, we're not asking questions about that. We're asking questions about her. And so that's a really interesting concept, right? But that also tells us we need to take a step back just a little bit, because these are society's questions for the most part. And so it blames in some ways, or it puts the responsibility of leaving, aka stopping the violence, on her, right? So one of the things we have to wrap our minds around is that's pretty pervasive, and that also helps us understand how it is that people, even who are in helping positions, approach violence or households that have violence going on inside of them. And so even when we're well-intentioned, even when we're trying to help, sometimes we can ask things that hint at these questions or these questions themselves. And it can really feel like blame is being put somewhere, responsibility is put somewhere. So I'm going to do my best to give you some answers to some of this in just a little bit, but I'm going to change topics for a bit. So I'm not going to ask you details, and you don't have to self-disclose, meaning talk about yourself. But I want you to recall a time where you were in a job, and if it's your current job, don't tell us that, right? Where you realized, this is not for me. I need to quit. I need to move on. This job is terrible, or this is not what I thought. Whatever the reason is why you need to quit is a little bit different. But have you ever had that time in your life where you had a job and you needed to quit? Yeah, I see a lot of head nodding, right?
Oh, I got 30 years on the job.
There you go. That's right. Retirement, and I'm out, right? All right. So here's the thing. If I also asked you, and I'm not, but if I also asked you when you realized that you wanted to quit that job, or it wasn't as you thought, or the pay wasn't as good, maybe minus retirement, I don't know. Did you just get a box and load up your stuff, your little plant, and your little Post-it notes, and say, I'm out. This has been real, but it hasn't been real fun, and I'm on my way out, right? So what kept you from grabbing the box and just walking out when you knew that this job was not for you? Money, yeah, right. You gotta pay some bills. Stability, yeah.
Responsibilities.
Responsibility, yeah. I would like to do, as an adult, I like to do what I want to do, and sometimes I do what I need to do, right? Yeah. Other ideas.
Unknowns.
Unknowns, yeah. So unknowns could mean, let's say that I leave this job that's not so great and I go get another one and it's worse than the job that I just left, right? So I thought working at Dollar Tree was terrible, and then I went to Dollar General and realized this is terrible, right? I don't know anything about dollar stores, I just made that up. So no affiliation, I've never worked at a dollar store, self-disclosure. Other reasons why you wouldn't just put stuff in a box and walk on out.
They pay you to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Say that again?
Pay you to leave.
They'll pay you to leave, okay. Yeah, so what do I get on my way out, right? There might be some benefits to going or going right now, or there might be some incentives to stay a little longer, right? Get a little more in my retirement income, right? Any other reasons?
Just be comfortable at your job, your now job, to go anywhere else.
Yeah, this is familiar. I know what to expect when I walk in, I know who's gonna be here, yeah.
There maybe has been a lot of training that went into that job.
Yeah, I went through 6 months of training to be a cashier at Dollar Tree, so I don't have to do that whole thing again, right? Yeah, did I miss anybody?
Loyalty.
Loyalty, yeah, and it can be loyalty to the company, it can be loyalty to your boss. I'm pretty loyal to being an educator, and so anything that I think about doing, I think about the students. How does this impact our students? How will this influence them? Will this help them? And so I'm pretty loyal to my profession, right, in some ways, yeah. Any others? Yeah.
The perception of failure.
Yeah, right? So why'd you quit? Why'd you leave? Why couldn't you make it work at Dollar Tree? How hard could it be to be a cashier at Dollar Tree, right? I get an example and I'll just roll with it for a little while. I'll change in a bit, I promise. So we just made a pretty good size list, and if you were a smart character, and I know that you are, you can make the connection between why we're talking about quitting a job and how that relates to violent relationships. And if not, I'll put a few more dots in a line so you can connect that. The same reasons you just talked about are many of the same reasons why people stay in relationships that don't necessarily have to be violent, although many are. Some relationships are just not healthy, or what people call dysfunctional, right? So I see a lot of head nodding, which I'm going to interpret as not yours, but people you know, right? So you got that one girlfriend that's like, oh, she would just leave him already, right? And so it takes a while to leave. It takes a while to leave a job. It also takes a while to leave a relationship. And so oftentimes we talk about it as if it's an event, this one-day thing where you box up your stuff and you walk out. But oftentimes it's a process, right? And there are a lot of anchors, many of which we named here, that keep people in the relationship. We keep people in jobs that are not so great, right? So you may know that the job is bad. You may know that this relationship is unhealthy, is not good for you or your kids, or is unsafe. And yet it might take you a little while to plan your money, to plan your exit strategy, to change kids' schools, to get an apartment, or any number of things, much like quitting a job, to move you on and out of that relationship. Yeah, see two hands.
What are the incentives for the abuser to stay in the relationship?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So why does the abuser stay in the relationship? Is that what you asked?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, why does, so I'm gonna use he.
So we're saying, okay, I guess a lot of times it would be he. So, he doesn't wanna abuse his wife and doesn't wanna traumatize the kids.
Sure.
So why does he stay?
Yeah, so let's think about that. So I'm gonna appeal to audience wisdom. Why do you think he stays in the relationship?
Maybe because he was brought up in that type of relationship.
Okay, yeah, so certainly the family you grew up in influences your ideas about family and who you are and how you build relationships. Okay, so some of that, yeah.
Maybe he likes the control.
Okay, yep. So I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like to be in control of some things. I like it when things go my way as opposed to maybe however the wind blows and not my way. So control, certainly a piece of it. Any other ideas? Yeah.
I think some men, they genuinely love their partner
Mhm.
and they believe that they can turn it around and they make that effort and they do their best, but everybody's best is different.
Yeah, absolutely. So he loves her. He loves her, and that sounds a bit strange. How do you hurt someone so much and yet claim to love them? It seems like that contradicts itself. And yet he does. He loves her, and he loves his children. And then also other gender variations. She loves him, she loves her children, or, a child, whatever the home configuration is, right? So these relationships are not markedly different from your relationship right now. You stay in a relationship with someone and you hope that they will change. You hope that one day your husband is going to take out the garbage without you asking. For the love of God, it's going to happen, right? Right? My husband hopes that I will remember my car charger on a consistent basis for my phone. I have about 14 of them. I drive off. And then I look down and my phone is on 6% and I'm driving an hour, and so lo and behold, I stop and I buy another phone charger, right? And he hopes that one day I will get that right? So it's a different thing altogether, violence, right? So I'm not making a comparison between violence and car chargers, just so we're clear. However, the hope of change, the belief, the possibility is the same. Right? I see the good in my spouse even if you guys can't or don't. I see some of his better moments and finer moments that don't make social media, right? I also see the really bad ones too. And to be fair, he sees all of mine, just so we're not one-sided. So these relationships have that same element built within them. Is she hopes that he will change. She wants him to change, right? So all that is baked into it. Yes, ma'am, you have it.
Well, going back to what you talked about with the anchors that, for example, that we all have if we're staying in a situation that's not so great. But one of the dynamics with this that I see is not only that they're going to hope that their partner is going to change, but the partners manipulate that hope.
Yeah.
My experience has been that the partners definitely manipulate that hope. One, they don't, somebody over here mentioned control, and it's their family, and they want to keep on to them. But the things that they will do psychologically that build on all the fears that you mentioned that you already have when you're contemplating trying to leave or make it on your own, really exacerbates
You are
it.
right and ahead, because that's
Oh,
coming.
sorry.
But you're great. No, you're great. You're great. That is So most of the time people think about this moment, right, of domestic violence where someone punches someone else, right? And they say, if anyone did that to me, I would leave, right? So a couple of things. One is we tend to hope what we would do, we tend to speculate what we would do, but until you're actually in circumstances, it's a little bit hard to predict what you would actually do, right? So there's that piece. And then the second is, it doesn't happen that way, because if it did, there wouldn't be date number 2, right? So if someone, if you're in the calamari and that moment happened, you'd be like, hey, so you can get the check, and I'm gonna go, and don't call me. No need to update the relationship status on social media. Like, this is done before it's even over with, right? Because it doesn't happen that way. And so we sort of think about it, and I exaggerate it to make the point, but we sort of think about it in ways as if that's how it happens, and that's a little bit of what you were saying, is there must be a foundation laid in order for someone to hit you and for you to stay. That doesn't happen by accident. That doesn't happen as a one-time occurrence. There is a solid foundation built in order for the violence to sit on top of that. Without that, it's pretty difficult for someone to be physically violent towards you and you stay another day or another 30 minutes or whatever that thing is. So a few of the things that we're going to talk about is, much like leaving is a process, how all this happens in a household or in a relationship is also a process. So I have to do, if I'm a perpetrator, I've got to do some foundation work to allow violence to occur between you and I. And so the first part about that foundation work is verbal abuse. And so oftentimes people think verbal abuse is just name calling, right? It's this overt, out there, if you were standing in a restaurant and you hear a man say something derogatory to a woman, you're just so stupid, you go, oh, verbal abuse, that's what that is, right? That's one kind of verbal abuse. If verbal abuse were only that thing out and about that you could see, it wouldn't work so well. So it's got to be a little bit more subtle. It's got to be a little bit more insidious. It's got to kind of creep in so that you don't see it coming and you don't always know that it's happening to ward against that, right? So if we're at Red Lobster eating calamari and you say, I think you're really stupid, and I might say, I think that this is going to be the end of our dating experience, right? So it doesn't happen that way. It starts slow, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Isolation is another key factor in my foundation. And so long as you can walk out and bounce ideas like, hey, and you talk to your family and you go, is this cool? And they go, no, that's not cool. And you talk to your best friend and you say, hey, he said this and I feel really bad about myself. And she says, well, you deserve better than that. So long as you have a chorus of people around you that say, leave that pool. You deserve better. That's not okay. You deserve better. Relationships aren't for dragging you down. It makes it a little bit hard for me, the perpetrator, to sort of go up against this choir of voices that are trying to convince you otherwise. So one of my strategies as a perpetrator is I'm going to get you by yourself. I'm going to work really hard to get you to give up your friends and your family. Now notice I said to give up, right? And so I'll work to tell a story about isolation in just a bit. I'm going to get to the next one. And then physical abuse. So let's say that these two things have occurred over time. The relationship has experienced, she's experienced the violence. He is abusive to her physically, emotionally, mentally, whatever ways. And so she says, oh my gosh, I do not want to be in this relationship anymore. This is not okay. You are not okay. We are not okay. I don't want to do this anymore. And so there's early efforts to reconcile, right? And so most of these make the TV shows, right? So turn on Hallmark, or it's probably not Hallmark, Lifetime, right? Hallmark has happy endings. It's Lifetime that's like, okay. Yeah, so Lifetime, right? Sorry, Hallmark. So turn on Lifetime, and you'll probably see the show. There's some sort of storyline, and so he's abusive, and so then he comes and he brings her chocolate and flowers, is like the stereotype of all stereotypes, right? But our partners know us, and so they don't always bring you chocolates and flowers. They know what matters to you, and they do that, and they bring that. And so if you say, If your partner says to you, I figured this out, and I'm going to start going to church with you. After all these years, I get it. You were right. I should have gone to church. I need Jesus in my life. And you say to yourself, I have been waiting for this. I have been waiting for him to go to church with me. He knows what matters to you. And that's what he gives to you as a reconciliation effort. He apologizes. He's remorseful. He's embarrassed. He's going to go to anger management. He's going to go to counseling. He's going to stop drinking, right? I'm going to go do that, fill in the blank of whatever she's been asking him to do for a really long time, right? And so he does that once, twice, 3 times, because we stay in relationships because we hope for the best, right? We give people second chances. And so after time number 3, 4 of I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, or whatever, she says, that's not going to work anymore. I've heard I'm sorry. You've been to counseling. You went to church and Jesus was there, but you didn't quite make that relationship happen. And I'm no fool. I might be a slow learner, but I am still a learner, right? And so she says, this is not going to be good enough anymore. I am not taking you back. And he says, game on. Okay. So the car note that's in your name and my name, I'm not paying it anymore. So good luck with that. So then people think twice, right? So you went to get that box out, put your plan in it to quit that job, and you go, ooh, let me think about that car payment. How will I pay the other half of that? What if I can't? And sometimes they can't, right? And so that's a deal breaker right there. It kind of stops this process of leaving. If they have children, he says, I will take you to court and I will take those kids. I will fight you for full custody. I will, whatever it is. Are you bipolar? I'm going to tell them that. And I'm going to tell them you don't take your meds. And remember one time on New Year's when you did cocaine? I'm going to tell them that too. Right? Or I'm going to take your kids to a foreign country and you'll never see them again. And so that might step her back into the relationship when I'm sorry won't anymore, right? You can get me to do a lot of things. I'm a pretty stubborn character. I like challenges. But if someone came in and said, if you leave me, I have a 15-year-old daughter, my husband and I have a teenager, so play for us. And if my perpetrator, if my spouse came in and said, if you leave me, I will kill her, I would stay. I stand in front of you talking about violence, and I would stay. If it's her life or mine, it's mine. And so, those are later efforts. I will kill the dog, your mom, you. I will take the children. Because when I'm sorry doesn't work, when chocolates and counseling and all those early efforts stop working, so they work for a while, later efforts shift and change. Does everybody follow that? Now, that tends to make the Lifetime movies sometimes, right? And then he turns into this, stalker, and we go, oh, wow, that guy, that's so strange. Actually, what research tells us is one of the most violent times in the relationships is when she is leaving, right? And so why is it? Why is it that she's afraid to go, right? Why is it that if we remove obstacles, if we have rent somewhere and a driver's license or a place to stay or another job or whatever these things are, why does she still go back? Because I would go back if my husband said, I will take our daughter, or I will hurt her or harm her. I would go back, and I would go back over and over again, because that's a very different feeling than I'm sorry, right? All right, so I'm going to go back and talk about isolation a little bit. And so these are sort of reasons why people stay, why people don't put a plant in their box and just walk on out of the house, right? And so isolation is part of the foundation that moves us in that direction where relationships go from maybe unhealthy to dysfunctional to abusive to outright violent, right? So isolation. One of my college roommates, who I'll not name, but one of my college roommates experienced this, and she didn't really know what it was and what was happening, and neither did we. And so she was dating this guy, He was a nice guy. He was friends with all of us. We had girls, big group of girls, big group of guys. We were all friends. We all hung out. She started dating one of the guys. And everything was great. And they decided to move in together. And it was still great. And what was happening behind the scenes that we didn't know until years later is we would all be at a restaurant. And on the way home, he would say, hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but whenever you went to the restroom, your friend so-and-so, she said your dress was like a little bit revealing. You're like looking for attention. And my friend would go, oh my gosh, I can't believe my friend would say that about me. And a table of my friends. Was my dress really that low, or shirt, or whatever? And she would say, oh, wow. And he would say, I know it's hard for me to tell you that, but I care about you, and I don't want people to think that you are provocative or slutty. So I wanted you to know, because I know you wouldn't want people to think. And she would say, oh, thank you for telling me that. I'm so embarrassed, right? And then we would go somewhere else, and we would all be out and about, and then the car ride home, he would say, hey, I don't know about your friends over here, because when you went to get a drink, they all started talking about how much weight you've gained, right? And she would say, oh my gosh, I have gained weight. I'm so embarrassed and self-conscious about that. And here's my friends, and they're talking about me behind my back. And he would say, I know, and I just want you to know, I don't think they're really your friends. And so she stopped returning their calls and their text messages, right? And so then it went a bit further, and, it was like, your mom, every time you get on the phone with your mom, you're sad or mad afterwards. Is that really the best thing for you? I'm really concerned about that, right? And so you can sort of hear what's happening. And so over time, she stopped calling her mom back, and stopped calling her mom back, and stopped coming to dinner, and stopped returning calls. And so we thought she was just kind of falling off the face of the earth. We didn't really know what was going on. What's happening is number 2. And so she stopped calling us back. We didn't push her away. We didn't know that was happening. But she voluntarily gave up a friend group and calling back her mom. And so fast forward, she was really isolated, experienced a pretty good amount of depression, and could not quite figure out what was going on. Got herself to see a therapist, and started talking about the relationship with him, and realized that this is pretty problematic. Could start to see some of that for what it was. Eventually left the relationship, and then started talking about what was going on that we didn't know about for all that time. So it is powerful beyond measure if someone can get you to give up your close friend group or your family, right? Yeah.
Is that called gaslighting?
Oh yeah, so gaslighting. I'm so glad you can talk about that. So gaslighting is certainly I'm going to make the list here, and I'll go back if I need to. Gaslighting is one of the ways in which verbal abuse occurs. I'm trying to give prominent examples without talking about politics, so I think I just won't give any in that realm. And then also we want to stay in a good mood, right? So the point of this slide is for you to see that there are many ways in which verbal abuse occurs, and gaslighting is one of them. And so our partners know us, and they know us well. They know what you're sensitive about. If you've gained 2 pounds and you're really worried about it, they know that about you, and so guess what's coming your way, right? They know your insecurities, they know your confidence, what you feel good about, and those are the things that they come at for attack, right? So what this does over time, and gaslighting is one of those things, what this does over time is it erodes what I call your internal compass. You have a true north, right? So in this room, we can say there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 round tables. All of us can agree on that. All of us can agree on that, right? All right. So what this does over time is it gets you to doubt that there are 6 tables, right? And so if I work hard enough, and if I get you to doubt who you are, and to doubt what's true, all I need is a crack in your foundation. And when I get a crack, I can take my reality and insert it as yours. And I can start to convince you that there's only 5 tables. And if I keep at it long enough and keep at it long enough, you will sit in a chair and you'll say, are there 5 tables? There's 6. I know there's 6. And at some point, when all this occurs over time, you'll say, maybe there's a way in which there's 5. Maybe I'm missing something. And when I get your true north to bump off just a little bit like that, that's the beginning of that foundation, or a foundation has probably pretty well been laid. It is powerful beyond measure to take your truth and get you to doubt it. Right? So one of the amazing things we do in counseling that sounds very, very simplistic and yet it's not, is we validate people's experience. And so when you come to us as counselors and you say, this is what I think and this is how I feel, if you're with a good counselor, they're not going to say, well, this or that or the other, is that we accept that as is. Now, that doesn't mean we agree or think that you're right. It just means that I accept that that is your truth. Your truth can be different than mine, but I accept that. Now, equally powerful in the reverse is to have someone invalidate your experience. That didn't happen. That didn't happen that way. You're making that up. You're exaggerating. And so when my friend would tell, my college roommate would tell him things like, I don't think that happened. And he would say, well, you're just naive, and so you can't see what's right in front of you. Now, if you did that once, it wouldn't work so well, but it happened over and over and over, and there were a number of other things happening at the exact same time. And so when your true north comes off, you don't know what's true anymore. And so when you watch those Lifetime movies and he comes home and he says, the dinner's too cold or hot or whatever that thing is, and she says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and she blames herself, right? If I wouldn't have, then he wouldn't have been abusive. That's the foundation has been laid and true north has been pushed off. And so his version is the version, right? So there are a variety of strategies. I remembered my book, so I'm going to pass it around. This is one of those cool ones, and so I should tell you up front, I am a nerd and I love to read, but I'm also mindful that not everybody likes to read the things I do. This is one of those cool things where it's a book you can pick up and put down and pick up and put down. You don't have to get out a highlighter. But what it does is it goes through each one of those and it says, here's what that is, and it gives a dialogue. He says, she says, he says, she says. So you can see and hear what it might sound like in action in conversation. It's a cheap little paperback. There's also, I think, a workbook version. I don't really remember. And so I have shared this with students and in trainings alike, and most people have really positive feedback because it really helps you see that verbal abuse is far more than name calling. I should also say that I am not related to Patricia Evans and have no financial ties to her, so if you buy it or don't buy it, it affects me 0. Alright, so there are a lot of reasons that you named about staying in a job that are also why she stays. Money is a pretty good reason to stay. I know that I live in the sort of social strata that I live in because of my income plus my husband's. And if my daughter and I went to just my income, it might look a little different at my house, right? So that calamari at Red Lobster may not happen very often, right? But we tend to think about it in one direction, as in he's going to control all the money, he's going to sort of take things, I'm going to take the car, the house, or whatever. There was an interesting, it wasn't my case, but another counselor shared it with me, where everything, he put everything in her name. So the jet ski, the car, the truck, the house, credit cards. And at the time, it was, well, you're the more responsible one. You manage all of our bills anyway. It makes the most sense. Come time for the relationship to end, he says, I'm not paying that. It's all in your name. Good luck with that. You want to leave? Go for it. Pay all that stuff on your own, because I'm not. And so it certainly makes you think about putting that kind of plan in a box and leaving a little bit differently when you have to think about that before you go. We are built for relationships. We are built for relationships. I would argue we're built for healthy relationships, but it's hard to have a breakup. it's hard for a relationship to fail or to feel like it failed. If you've been married for 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, if you've been married for a year and you've got a kid, that's a significant investment, time frame wise, emotion. Most of the time we have defended our partners to our friends, to our spouses, and it's embarrassing to go back and like, y'all are right. He was a shady character, right? And then sometimes people don't have that support around them to go back and say, yeah, I told you so. Because of the isolation, it might just be her, and there isn't a social support to return to. And so that can certainly be problematic. So when we're looking at households, one of the things that we're looking to think about is social support and how to build that around if there's not one.
So I have a question, let's kind of move forward. Are there instances where the perpetrator kind of victimizes themselves and almost,
In what ways? Do you have like thoughts in mind, examples in mind?
like an example would be like, you know, they start fights, they start arguments, and somehow turn it around so it's all your fault.
Oh yeah.
And then like, you know, convince your friends into your support system, you share that group of friends,
Yeah.
you know, so if you lose them, then you're also losing your support system.
Yes.
I don't know.
So in a different context, just turn on any reality TV show, any last one of them, any last one of them. And there's two people at lunch, right? We go to lunch together, and then I say something, and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that, blah, blah, blah. And then I call you up and go, oh my gosh, girl, we were at lunch, and she just lost it. I don't know what was wrong with her, and I conveniently left out that really hurtful thing I said before she lost it at our, you know, lunch over tacos or whatever. But then I'm going to tell you that, and you go, I don't know if she seems like someone that would lose it, and I'm pretty convincing, right? And so I've got you convinced, or at least doubting whether or not she really lost it at lunch or not. And so perpetrators can do that to your friend groups and your social supports as well. So if you're not giving them up, they can work to put some doubt into some places. One perpetrator went and slept with all her friends, right? So how's that for good friends in your circle group? You know, I slept with all those people, right? So different ways in which isolation occurs. So yeah, they are certainly would see themselves as the victim. Oftentimes will portray themselves as the victim and will stand right in front of you and could probably hook up to a polygraph and pass a lie detector that they believe that they are the